If I were Pittsburgh, though, I would take this as a blessing in disguise and start trading off some of these assets while you're at this high.
Today's episode, we are pleased to have Jimmy Hockey come back on the show once again. How are you doing today?
Doing great. How you guys doing, fellas?
Doing good. Thanks for stopping by again. It was a good chat with you last time. Happy to have you back.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we're hanging in there. Sabres tank for James Hagens. Yeah.
I got Ralph Kruger in the background.
We're good tribute to that. So we're gonna start with a little bit of on a positive note here instead of going into the Sabres. The Pittsburgh Penguins are rolling right now. They're 7-2-1 in their last 10 games. They have won back-to-back games. They are currently 1 point out of a playoff spot with 35 points behind the Ottawa Senators, who have 36. The Penguins might be quote unquote back per se. This is what I told you, Preston. I thought the Penguins are going to linger around in the playoff race. They're not. I don't have them making the playoffs, but as long as you have Crosby, Malkin, even can throw in Letang in there, they're just going to hang around for a bit, and it might end up the same way as last year, where they miss out by a couple points because they couldn't get the job done down the stretch, or whatever. Goaltending, maybe the goaltending hasn't been the greatest this season, but it is nice to see that the Penguins have picked it up since their very slow start to start the season.
Yeah, Pittsburgh's still not a team I'm very high on. I think this is the result of the Eastern Conference being mid as a whole. You know, the Rangers are free falling. Ottawa's surging right now, which is a little bit of a surprise. But Boston, isn't having the season people expected out of them. So, I mean, it's up for the taking. That I think that those wild card spots is going to be a battle all season long. And, Pittsburgh's definitely in that conversation. They've been playing better than I thought they have been, are on paper lately. So, I mean, you never know what could happen.
Yeah, I completely agree with Preston. I don't think this has anything to do with the Penguins really doing anything different. I think if you just look at their division, the Eastern Conference, obviously Buffalo, New York Islanders, the Rangers, teams that we expected to be competing for those wild card spots are now the teams losing to the Penguins. If I were Pittsburgh, though, I would take this as a blessing in disguise and start trading off some of these assets while you're at this high. I'm very low on the Penguins, and I don't mean that to come across terribly, but outside of Crosby, you're not going to do anything in the playoffs. So, what's the point? You're trying to win a championship, and I don't even think if they get in, they're going to be able to get past the first round.
I don't even know if they win a game, honestly. Yeah. If they're getting in, they're a wild card team, and if they have to play Florida, Toronto, Washington, New Jersey, I don't even know if they win a game.
Well, any team above them would end up beating them. Even the Bruins or Senators, if they something miraculous.
Those two, but
maybe not the Bruins. Maybe not the Bruins. I think the Senators would walk them, though. I do.
I don't know. I think the Bruins would have a good shot. I truly do.
Yeah.
I mean,
I think
the
Bruins, maybe experience-wise, I feel like the Penguins and Bruins are very similar teams right now, with the Bruins just having a little bit more of a defensive presence, I feel like, than the Penguins do. But goaltending, it's not like Swayman's leveling up or anything. Whereas Ottawa, you look at their team, and I feel like they're just finally playing up to potential and what we all know they're capable of. Just watching that game the other night against the Flames with Brady Tkachuk just going off with the 9 stitches and coming back, winning the game. Ottawa's got a real team, whereas Pittsburgh, they don't have good goaltending. Their defense is flat, and they're just kind of beating up on bad teams. So, yeah, I think eventually it'll level out. And if I were them, I would use this as an opportunity to be like, all right, at the deadline, who wants Malkin? Who is willing to take Carlson if I can get rid of him?
I don't know if Carlson could be moved. I don't think that contract
if you're lucky,
retain 50%. I think it's movable. I don't think a team would be willing to take on even half of what he's making right now with how he's playing. And one move that I didn't really get, because the Penguins ended up trading Cody Glass in the offseason. They traded for Philip Tomasino about a month and a half ago. I truly didn't get that, because you have Cody Glass, who I personally thought that the Penguins could have used him in a way that I don't specifically know how. I'd have to get into the more gist of that. But with Philip Tomasino, you trade away Cody Glass, who's a young center, and then you trade for one in Philip Tomasino. If you try to put 2 and 2 together, I don't know if it's just going over my head, but I truly didn't get that trade. And then, so personally, you're gonna keep him on the roster. The only 3 guys that I really wouldn't trade if I'm the Penguins: Crosby, Malkin, and Letang. I think anybody else on the roster is completely movable. If we look at their trade clauses, salary, whatever, that's a little bit deeper dive into it. And I would honestly, if Nedeljkovic was playing how he was last season, I would say ship him off. But he's having a horrendous season. The entire goaltending is having a horrendous season, to be honest with you. And personally, I kind of wish that the Penguins would play more of Bloomquist because he's been the best goalie out of the 3. But I mean, Jari's giving you no production. Nedeljkovic has the same exact stats. Absolutely horrible. 3.5 goals against, save percentage like 880. So you're getting no goaltending. The defense doesn't know how to play hockey, basically. And outside of like Crosby and Malkin, maybe some Brian Rust here and there, you're not really getting much offensive production from the team.
Yeah, but is that more of a nostalgia take for you with the whole Malkin and Letang thing? Is that
I would
where you're
move
going off?
them.
I would too.
I would move Letang especially.
Yeah. I feel like they both have some value. I've seen reports. I think the Chicklets guys have talked about Dallas being interested in Malkin with Sagan being out with his injury and stuff. Like the only way I would hang on to Malkin and Letang if you're trying to do right by them as a franchise and they say we don't want to be traded, we want to retire here. And you're just like, you know what? Like you've done so much. Yeah, okay. But if Malkin and Letang are like, yeah, we'd be down to go to a team that has a chance with the cup if they're willing, and you can get assets back, like again, you're not doing anything with this team. It's not going anywhere. If the Penguins win the Stanley Cup, like that would be like the craziest odds in the world to me that they would do that.
Dude,
Like, they have just as much of a chance as Buffalo in my eyes, if that's a nice way to put it. So
Yeah, I think the only untouchable player on this team is still Sidney Crosby, just because he's Sidney Crosby. I mean, I think especially in the case of Malkin, I don't think he would be willing to be moved unless he really, really, really wanted to, win another cup. I think legacy is important for him, and I think playing his whole career in Pittsburgh is a big thing for him. I'm sure it's the same thing with Letang. They have full no movement clauses too, so it would be, even if you had teams interested, it'd be really tough to move them regardless. But I mean, if you get a really good offer for them and they're willing to move, I'd say move them. Just Crosby's the only one that I would not even take calls on.
yeah, because otherwise it's just justifying kind of those trades you were talking about, Zach. Like they can't do anything. They don't have assets. They don't have cap space. So what they're trying to do is retool while also respecting these veterans that have been like franchise players. And some of the moves, they're just trying to be like, hey, there's some upside here. Let's give it a shot. Or maybe we'll try to get something back for a few players that we can dish out. And that's what you're seeing with Pittsburgh right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think Dubas is doing the best he can given the situation. The one trade I didn't like that he made was the Rucker McGorty trade, trading him away to Winnipeg. I think Yeager is a better prospect than McGroarty. I think maybe it was Pittsburgh saying McGroarty might be ready to play in the NHL sooner than Yeager, and we really need just young guys in the lineup, and that's why you make that trade. But I think, for the long-term future of the Penguins, I think Yeager would have been a better fit in that farm system for them.
Yeah, and I think it goes to what you were saying. Like they're trying to find anything. Like maybe McGroarty would have like a slight upside sooner rather than later, so we could do something with Crosby. Whereas Yeager probably would have been the more steady option going forward if they had kept him.
The Penguins are
I mean,
trying to
I
hang
get
on.
why he did it. It's just you're in a tough spot. You have Crosby
brutal,
who wants you to keep making moves because he wants to win another cup in Pittsburgh. He pretty much tells you to go get Erik Karlsson, which was a mistake.
Yeah, I think we all can agree on that.
Yeah. I mean, especially Erik Karlsson, I think, is the best when he's like the number one defenseman, and they have Chris Letang. That's still, I think he's kind of a similar player to Erik Karlsson.
They're the exact same player, the exact same.
There was an interesting stat going back to when Karlsson and Brent Burns went in San Jose, and their stats went down. Would you think, well, they're both like elite defensemen? Why would they be worse? It's because they're the same player. They're both offensive driving play defensemen, and when you have both of those, they can't play together because then you're not going to get any defense, and that holds them both back. And then that's why Karlsson has 100 points when Brent Burns gets traded away to Carolina. And I think Karlsson is still a pretty decent defenseman. It's just Pittsburgh's not a good fit for him.
Yeah.
I mean, we saw personally the best offensive version of Erik Karlsson that we've ever seen once Brent Burns left and went to Carolina. And this feels like the same situation like that. Like, I get Karlsson's coming off the Norris Trophy winning season when they traded for him and the 100-point season from a defenseman. And I totally get the high on that. But to take on that $11 million contract, complete mistake. Like, The fact did San Jose, they didn't retain anything, right? Or no, they
They
did. They did.
retained, I
25 was it?
think it was 25%.
Are they
It was
Yeah.
something small. It
paying
was
him
something
like
small.
9.5 or something like that? The Penguins are.
Yeah,
Let me
which
check
is still
that.
pretty gross overpay for his performance with him. And it's what you just said, man. Like when he's by himself, he thrives. Ottawa, when Burns left San Jose, and it was very clear that Pittsburgh needed a shutdown defenseman. They
Mhm.
didn't need an offensive defenseman. And the only way they should have gotten Carlson is if they were sending out Letang, but they kept both and they didn't do anything else to address all of their other needs. So that's why they're in this position. And not to mention their subpar goaltending, which without a good shutdown pairing is even worse.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, they
You,
just don't have great depth, in my opinion. I mean, I think, like I said earlier, I think this team is a product of the rest of the Eastern Conference not being very good. And if they had to play like any heavyweight contenders, I think they'd crumble immediately.
Sticking in the Eastern Conference, there's two teams that kind of caught the entire East by storm: the Washington Capitals or the New Jersey Devils, especially the Washington Capitals. I'm going to ask you guys a question. Which team has the better chance to win a cup this season, the Capitals or the Devils?
I'm gonna go with the Devils. Um, it's not that I don't believe in Washington, but I just feel like Washington's a really good regular season team. And maybe if you told me Washington went out and made a big swing for a player that's available, and I'm not saying like some superstar, like I've seen some rumors about like Brandon Saad being available from St. Louis or Frank Vetrano from Anaheim, those type of players maybe you could convince me otherwise, but the Devils, like young players, they're playing with nothing to lose. They beefed up in every area. And I
Mhm.
just feel like the Devils, when fully healthy, are going to be a very tough outing in the playoffs. And they're going to be one of those surprising teams this year that a lot of people are going to underrate, but I could see them going pretty deep, especially considering how their division is panned out with like New York not being as good. And I think they could still go toe to toe with like Washington and Carolina. So I would go with Devils.
Yeah, that's a tough one for me because I really like Washington's team. I like the Devils team a lot. I mean, I think Washington might be the most surprising team in the Eastern Conference this year with how much better they've gotten. Barely being one of the worst teams to ever make the playoffs last season to winning, leading their division, pretty dominant. They're really good. I don't know, like because Washington does have some experienced guys on their team still. Like they still got Ovi who is coming back soon. I don't know how the hell he healed that quick. Tom
How
Wilson's
much do
actually
you
having,
guys like value experience in the playoffs? Because that's the big difference between these
yeah,
It
two
depends. Well,
teams.
it depends because you get to a certain point of experience where it's like they just don't have it anymore at like that super high level that they once did. But there's also the experience where you get a taste of a couple playoff runs, whether it's first round exits or cup championships, doesn't matter. And now you go into the next step of I have the skill, I have the talent, I have the experience, I know what it takes to win a Stanley Cup and or at least play in the playoffs at a high level. And when you look at the Devils, a lot of this roster, I think half of the roster was part of the team that made the playoffs a couple years ago when they were on that high with Lindy Ruff, whatever. Then on the Capital side of things, I think this is what's going to hurt the Washington Capitals: the lack of star power in the playoffs. When normally when the team goes on a deep playoff run, you always have that one superstar that can take over a game, or you have that superstar that is just lighting the lamp. And I don't think the Capitals have that. No disrespect to Ovechkin. No disrespect to McMichael. Dylan Strome is a very, very good one center in the league. Don't think he's in that elite or superstar category yet. And then you move over to the Devils side. They have Jesper Bratt, the most underrated forward in the league. Jack Hughes, and then you also have Nico Hischier, who could potentially win the Selkie. Those are three guys right there
and they
that
have
can
Timo
score
Meyer
at
too.
will. Right. And then you go over to goaltending. I think the Capitals have the edge in goaltending just because the tandem's great. If one of them goes down, they have a backup goaltender that can be a starter in the league. And they've both played 16 games apiece. They're splitting it down the middle. And the Devils, I love Markstrom. He's been great for them. He's been a difference maker for this team. But I don't know if I would trust Jake Allen if Jacob Markstrom were to go down, knock on wood that he doesn't.
Yeah.
And then Jake Allen steps in to play a 7-game series against a team, let's say Florida, for example, right? Or Toronto.
Yeah.
So
I
I,
think sometimes though, man, having that number one starter is actually more of a positive than a negative because we saw that happen with Boston 2 years in a row where trying to figure out who your goalie is going to be, it's a psychological toll on your team. It adds more attention to something that you don't need to think about, where everyone has the risk of getting an injury to their starter goalie. But when it comes to Washington, their tandem isn't even as legit as Boston's was with Allmark and Swayman. So now you're like, Charlie Lindgren wasn't that great in the playoffs last year, but that was probably because the team was just bad. And Logan Thompson, he can do it, but don't forget he was benched for Aiden Hill when he was in Vegas. So are either of those two goalies really proven, and are either of them really a legit number one starter that you can roll in every other night in a playoff series? I think their goaltending is actually more of a Achilles heel for the team than it's going to be a positive compared to New
Yeah.
Jersey.
Yeah, I think also in New Jersey's, and I think Jake Allen's one of the better backups in the league, and I think New Jersey would have a lot of faith, like if Markstrom did go down in the playoffs, to depend on Jake Allen. I think that's big. One of the biggest differences for the New Jersey Devils this year is having two goalies back there that they can trust. It's amazing how much different a team can play when they know they have good goaltending out there. They're less afraid to make mistakes. They're gonna be looser, playing with more speed and energy. Because last year when they had Vanacek and Schmid and probably another goalie I'm thinking about, like, you make too many mistakes, the puck's in your net. You can't depend on those guys to win you a game, even if you're having an off night. So you can't really have many off nights. And I think in a 7-game series, if I had to pick between New Jersey and Washington, I would probably pick the Devils. I think up and down this roster is better. They have a lot of good balance of younger players, some veteran players. I mean, their top 6 is legit, like really, really great. Jack Hughes, Jesper Bratt, like Zach said. Yeah, I mean Washington. I agree with Jimmy there with their goaltending. I think it might come to a detriment in the playoffs, especially if Charlie Lindgren starts game 1, has a bad game. They go to Logan Thompson, he looks okay, and then game 3 he looks bad. They go back to Lindgren, like you don't really know what you're going to get out of those two goalies.
Yeah,
the Devils' speed is killer. They're one of the fastest teams in the league. They're one of the fastest paced teams in the league, and like looking at the Capitals, that insane run they went on down the stretch last season that got them in the playoffs, and whatever happened with the Wings Flyers game, whatever that we won't get into. The Capitals got in and then got absolutely smacked around by the President's Trophy winning New York Rangers, and they looked like a different. They look slow, to be honest with you. And this is most of the same exact roster except a few additions. And you look at the Devils. The fact that they can beat any team with speed really comes to say. And on top of it, they can also lock it down on the back end. They have one of the best blue lines in the league. And then you add Jacob Markstrom. I think that would be huge for the Devils. And if this team goes on to the Eastern Conference Finals, I don't think anybody should be that surprised or bat an eye at it, because this team has the caliber to be the lone team out of the East to make it to the Cup final. And I don't know if that's an overreaction or not, but they're my Stanley Cup team out of the East. So, like, now, what's that?
That's a pretty bold prediction.
Yeah, that's pretty bold. Yeah,
I would
don't
say
think
they're not
that's
even
that
the best team
bold.
in their division, man. I think people are sleeping on Carolina a
so
lot.
I was going to bring Carolina
Yeah,
up. I think that would be a tough series for the Devils.
Yeah, I think we saw it 2 years ago, man. Like
Mhm.
Carolina walked them, and of course they didn't have goaltending, and it was like Schmid in net for them. But if you just look at the East, like I even think Toronto would walk the Devils, and
Well,
that's
Toronto's
saying
gotten
something.
so much
Toronto's
better
sick.
defensively, and they're
Yeah.
getting quality goaltending this year. I think the Devils' biggest nightmare would be a really defensively strong team to slow them down, force them to play outside. Because I think the Devils are at their best when they're controlling the pace of play. And in the playoffs, you're not going to get that. You're going to be playing elite teams in a 7-game series, and I think they would have a tough time against Carolina, teams like Toronto, Florida.
Yeah, those are like the top ones, man. I just think Carolina gets that like, oh, they're always there effect. Like they're gonna be good. They're defensive minded, so they're boring. Nobody talks about them in the regular season. But I feel like eventually this team is gonna find a way to win in the playoffs. And their defense, if you want to talk about a blue line, their defense is ridiculous. The only problem with Carolina again is goaltending. They just always have that issue. And I wish they would just find someone that they could bring in and be like, hey, we know you're going to be our starter. You're not going to be hurt, because as good as Anderson is, he's just never healthy. And I don't know if the Chekhov's ready for that. Yeah. So, but they're easily one of the teams I think a lot of people are sleeping on this year, because everyone else is just flashier,
Yeah, I agree with that, because right now I believe Carolina's tied with Florida as the betting favorites to win the Cup, or Dallas, something like that, at plus 750 is what I saw the other day. I would agree that Carolina could make it out of the East. I hopped off their bandwagon because they made me look like a complete idiot the last 2 years. But I think Carolina is slept on though. If Carolina played the Devils, I would take the Devils in 7 games. But I think Carolina could also be a team where you're not going to bat an eye, to be honest with you. And I think in the East, there's only any of the wild card teams, of course, you would be shocked if they ended up somehow making it out of the East as a wild card team. And then the Tampa Bay Lightning. And what do we throw Washington? If Washington hypothetically made the Cup, would we be surprised on that?
Yes.
Could we agree?
Yeah, I
They
think
made the Cup final.
yeah, if Washington made the Cup final, if New Jersey made the Cup final, I would actually be pretty surprised, barring any like moves, because I do think New Jersey still needs to get a top 6 winger, like a scoring winger. But like I think those 2 teams making the Cup finals would actually be crazy, just based on like Florida, Toronto, Boston, all those other teams you would have to get through. And I'm still not counting out New York, the Rangers, despite all of their
Yeah.
lapses lately. I think if they get in as a wild card and you have to play the Rangers in the first round with Shesterkin, that's going to be a tough series to play.
Playoff Igor Shesterkin's a different beast.
Yeah. So I think we're kind of sleeping on the East a little bit just because the regular season has looked really bad compared to the West, especially like the top dogs in the West. But if you end up, it's going to be like a Vegas thing with Dallas last year. Like you get the Rangers in the first round,
You don't want that.
that's like a terrible conference series in the first round. So
You know what would be a good first round matchup though? I would love to see the Rangers go play either Florida or Toronto. Personally,
I don't think the Rangers would want to play Florida, but
well, nobody
no,
wants
yeah,
to
I think
play
they
Florida.
I think they would walk Toronto though.
Nobody
And
would. Nobody wants Florida though, to be honest, in their defense. Like
Yeah.
right now, Florida should be the favorite out of the East.
yeah.
Yeah, they're just so well rounded. But like again, if it depends on what these teams do, because we can't make that prediction. But I don't
Mhm.
think the Rangers are done. I don't think they're like, oh, we're gonna sell
Neither
off
do
our
I.
pieces and then cave. Like we just kind of talked about it briefly, but just like we were saying, I think the Kako thing was the dumbest thing that organization has done in years. Like the dumbest thing. Like
Yeah.
you get nothing back. He was making like 2.4 million. It's going to be an RFA, so it's not like you're going to lose him in free agency. You could sell the rights to him or whatever, and you give it for nothing. Will Borgen is like a 28-year-old defenseman who plays on Seattle's third line, had
Mhm.
3 points in 33 games. The guy's not going to do anything for you. You get a 3rd round pick and a 5th round pick, and you suck at drafting. So that's the thing about the Rangers that's kind of pissing me off. But in terms of like them giving up, I don't think they're giving up. I think you're going to see them make a big swing in a free agent.
I mean, with us the superstars they have on that team, they can't give up. They just
No.
paid Igor Shesterkin. I know Panarin's hurt right now, but he's amazing. I don't know if Kreider will figure it out, but this team has just too much star power on that team just to go away. I think we talked about this in our episode on Wednesday. Zach was kind of looking at me like I was crazy. I think the Rangers will recover from this. I think they'll be fine.
Yeah, they're going to be in on one of the biggest free agents that come out. They now have that 8 million from Trouba. Wait till there's somebody who's on the market. They're going to make a big swing. They were tampering apparently with Brady Tkachuk. The minute they find out somebody is available, whether that's Trevor Zegras based on his recent injury or whoever pops up, I wouldn't count on them getting young guys. I don't want them to get young guys because they clearly can't develop. But when it comes to like other players, like go get a superstar and they will be right back where they were.
Yeah, because like whether you like it or not, with their management mistakes, they still are a big, attractive market for free agent players. They're playing in New York, Madison Square Garden. They're competitive every year. It's
Yeah.
enticing.
Yeah, a little fun fact for you guys. Jack Hughes in his career, I'm doing a little bit of research for a different video that I'm doing. Jack Hughes has over 330 points in his career.
Mhm.
Combined, Alexi Lafreniere and Kaapo Kaako have 300. So that goes to show you
That's
a,
crazy.
a first overall pick and a second overall pick. They're not the problem. It's the Rangers. Like you're
Mhm.
not giving these players opportunities. So if that means you can't get young guys because you're not willing to take a chance on them, that's an organizational issue.
Mhm.
Get a bigger, like older guy who can actually slot into the lineup that you'll use.
Yeah, I
Because
think Kakko was going to blossom in Seattle. I think he's going to have a lot of pressure come off him playing in a much smaller market. They're going to let him figure out his game, and they're going to give him a chance to grow. And I think that was a great pickup by Seattle, especially they barely gave up anything for him.
there's a no lose, dude. It
Yeah.
was so good for them. Like you don't have anybody on your lineup that is like a true superstar. You're bringing up guys like Shane Wright. Throw Kako on PP1 and just be like, go off, go
Yeah.
show us what you can do, kid. And if he doesn't work out, wipe your hands of
Yeah,
it.
it's
Like
not a big deal.
you don't have to do anything. Like he's not going to command an 8x8 contract or anything like that. Like he's a solid third line winger or center, whatever position he plays at this point at best. So like throw him around your lineup. I don't know why the Rangers thought that was a necessary move to make. I feel like it was very, very just like reactive to him making comments to the media. And that just shows you where the Rangers are at. They just don't have a plan right now. So
I I completely agree with everything you said. I'm looking at their lines from their last game. Kaapo Kaako was their first line right wing, and he was their right wing on power play 2 with Shane Wright, Jaden Schwartz, Burakovsky, and Brandon Montour. Kako could very well turn into a good 50 to 60 point scorer before we know it, and the Rangers are going to look like idiots because the underlying uses of Will Borgen, in which I did some research before he was traded, I was like, maybe the Sabres could trade for him for a second stint, whatever, and possibly recover him some fucking house, the Sabres organization. And his underlying numbers are complete shit. They're complete shit. His in the percentiles, he's in the teens, and it's not good. And then the Seattle needed a young forward like Kakko, got it, and I'm really excited to see him play with Beniers and Shane Wright and even McCann, who's been great for Seattle this season. So
I think McCann's very underrated.
yeah.
He's their best forward. I think that.
He's the only one that can score. One of the only forwards that can score consistently.
Yeah, and I think Kako just adds to that. Now, what you're doing is you're building a young core rather than saying, "Hey, we're just going to keep drafting." They're like, "No, if like somebody becomes available, that's a project piece." I think any other team in the league should have been going after Kako if that's what the price was. Look at Buffalo or Boston, dude. They
Yeah.
should have been going for Kako. You
Yeah,
guys need the help
those are two teams
scoring.
we brought up.
Yeah, like why aren't you trading for these players? Like I would have given a second round pick for Kako and been like, let's see what the upside is. Screw it. Like
I think if I'm those teams like Boston, Buffalo looking for young players, I think my attention turns to Trevor Zegras out of Anaheim. I
Oh,
think
yeah.
it's another reclamation project. Clearly, him is not working in Anaheim with him. I know he's hurt, but he last couple of years he just hasn't looked right, and I think new change of scenery for him could do him wonders.
Yeah, the only difference with Zegras with Kako is Zegras has more term and Zegras has done a little bit more than Kako, but I think you're right. Like, I don't think anybody's trading more than like a second round pick for
Mhm.
Zegras. So if you're Boston, if you're Buffalo or a team like that, that's like, hey, we got to do something, change up something, go make a trade for that player
Mhm.
because you don't have it in your system. And Rangers are another team that should try to do something like that. But that's a little bit more tricky because, like I said, they can't use young players because they suck at it. So
The
Yeah.
Rangers fumbled the bag with that. They almost fumbled the bag with Alexi Lafreniere. They almost
mean,
did.
it's not
Like,
over yet. It's not
Yeah,
over yet.
I would
Like,
still say he's nowhere close to his potential. I don't know if he'll ever reach it with the Rangers.
no, he's only has like I think 20 points in like 35 games this year. Like he's a first overall pick, and not everyone's the same. Like we talked about it with Buffalo potentially going all the way at the end, getting the first overall pick this year. How it's not the same as Bedard. It doesn't mean that you're not a good player. Like Lafreniere
Yeah.
should consistently be like 80 points every year, like Zibanejad type of player. Scores on the power play a lot. Is a good offensive player, not super defensive minded, which I think he's gotten better at, but they just don't give him opportunities. And what you're seeing is a team's young players developing a lot slower because they have all these veterans that they tried to plug and play into their lineup and fix all their holes to get back to relevancy. And now you're seeing it kind of fall apart because these guys are getting older. They're not buying into the culture. And the young guys don't like being healthy scratched for no reason. So,
I'm not gonna disrespect Riley Smith because he's in the NHL playing for the Rangers. But why do we have your first overall pick, Alexi Lafreniere, playing on the power play unit with Riley fucking Smith on the second power play unit? Like that's just a recipe for disaster. And I get Laviolette was able to get a little bit more out of Lafreniere than Gerard Gallant did, and gave him a little bit of a
Gallant
more of an
almost
opportunity.
ruined
Killed
Lafreniere.
him.
Oh my
Killed
God.
him.
yeah, he basically did. He killed
Yeah.
Kako.
Yeah.
He destroyed Kako. And we see it happen all the time. This isn't the first case. It's just, I don't know if at this point this is your second head coach. So I'm starting to think that this is a Drury problem and
I
that
do
they need
too.
to start considering something else or just like go behind the scenes and destroy, blow up your drafting and developing team. Go to Dallas and say, hey, who are you guys willing to let go? Bring them in and offer them twice the amount of money because Dallas knows what they're doing. You don't. So figure out what their model is and then go after that because you can't develop young players.
Yeah, because I feel like with the Rangers, I think Chris Drury's job is definitely on the line. I think if they don't make the playoffs, he's definitely fired. And if I think
Oh
they
yeah,
lose in the first round of the playoffs, I think there's a decent chance he's fired. I think ownership has very high expectations for this team, and I think the last few weeks he's been crumbling under the pressure. I didn't like that Trouba trade very much. I know you needed to clear the money, but I didn't like the way they treated him in that whole situation. I don't
agreed,
think that's a way to treat your captain.
agreed.
In Kaapo Kaako, you trade him away for pretty much nothing, and especially if he ends up becoming even like a second line player, I think that makes you look really, really bad.
Yeah, even if he becomes a legit third line player, like
Yeah,
those are hard to come by in this league. People go around looking for those playoff teams, and you shipped yours away for nothing because there was probably some kind of dispute between the coaching staff and the young players, which again is kind of the ultimate problem in New York. Like, if you're bringing in these old school head coaches, but your whole goal is to develop these young superstars that you were basically gifted with the Lafreniere and Kako
yeah,
drafts. What are you doing here? Like, I just don't understand. You have so many good players, Fox, Panarin, Shesterkin on every level. You're messing up Keandre Miller. You're messing up Alexi Lafreniere, and now Kaapo Kako's gone. So if I'm a Rangers fan, I'm pissed, and I'm selling like this whole organization like a whole new under. I don't know. It's crazy to me when I look into it.
Tom Wilson broke this organization four
Yeah.
years ago.
Yeah.
Shifting over to the Western Conference, the Colorado Avalanche are playing much better hockey than they did to start the season. They finally got healthy. They got everybody back. They traded for Mackenzie Blackwood, ended up getting rid of Georgiev. The team looks rejuvenated. They've won back-to-back games. They're 7-3 in their last 10. They currently sit sole possession of third place in the Central Division with 40 points. Still have yet to lose an overtime or shootout, which is honestly impressive. And right now, they look like they could potentially steal that third spot from Dallas. I know it's going to be early, but I think this is going to be a situation where it was how Colorado and Winnipeg was last season for the second and third spot, except it's going to be for the third spot in the Central and the wild card one between Dallas and Colorado. It's going to be a race that's going to be really, really good. And who knows? Right now, Minnesota is in a little bit of a skid. Colorado is only 4 points back of Minnesota. Granted, the Wild have two games in hand on them, but that doesn't mean the Wild don't drop those 2 games. Colorado now has the advantage because they're hot. Minnesota's not. I know we're not even halfway into the season, but the Colorado Avalanche, man, they're back. They're healthy. They look better than ever.
Well, I think Nathan McKinnon's having another MVP season. I think that's been a big thing for them too.
Mhm.
Was he's 55 points this year, like 30 games, which
Leads
is
the league in
absurd.
points.
55 points in 35 games. Colorado, I mean, I said this like a month ago when they were like faltering the standings. They were injured to hell and back. They're starting to get healthy now. They have a goalie. I mean, it's very early in the season still. I know we're very reactionary to the standings, but I mean, I wouldn't shock me if they end up winning the Central Division. They're just that good. I mean, Winnipeg's great. Don't get me wrong, but if Nathan McKinnon keeps playing at a level like this, they're going to be hard to beat. He can just take over games.
Yeah, I completely agree because I think the story about Colorado shouldn't be if they're good enough to win a Stanley Cup. I think it's more about what's going on with Gabriel Landeskog and are they going to give Mikko Rantanen a contract and is he going to ask for a dry settle number and is it worth all that? That's more what I'm considering when it comes to Colorado because I think they could have put anyone else in net outside of Georgiev and been okay. He was just a head case at that point and you just needed to move off of him. Hopefully he can find success in San Jose because I actually think he's a really good goalie too. But yeah, I don't know. Do you guys think that they should pay Mikko Rantanen at this point? Like,
Yes. I think he's
It
gonna.
depends how much money.
Yes, I've thought
If he
about
wants
this.
Draisaitl money, I
yeah,
don't know how they can make that work.
Give it
but
to
with
me.
the
I
cap
think.
going up, like, think about it.
Listen.
Like, it's tough because even Draisaitl's making more than McDavid, which he shouldn't be. I think we all can agree on that, right? But
Well, that will
because
change.
of course, yeah, but same
Yeah.
thing, right? Eventually, Nathan McKinnon will round out, or maybe not, depending on the age and how the contracts work. But like, Rantanen is arguably, in my opinion, one of the most underrated players in the game. Nobody talks about him. You just talked about Nathan McKinnon having an MVP season. Rantanen has like 4 less points than him this year.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like it's literally what we're seeing in Edmonton with McDavid and Draisaitl, but people just don't talk about it because it's in Colorado and not as big of a market. And I think it's the same situation though. So maybe you don't want to pay him more money, but is it worth letting him go and pissing
No.
off McKinnon?
Listen.
I think you
okay.
find a way to keep him around. I think especially they're getting a bargain on Cale Makar's contract, only $9 million.
Yeah,
That's crazy to call that a bargain, but he could easily be getting 13, 14
Wait,
million
wait.
dollars. I think he's
facts,
the best
facts.
defenseman in the league.
Hmm.
So I think you find a way, even if it's not an 8-year deal, if it's like a 4 or 5-year deal, and you're paying him like $14 million a year, I think you just find a way to make it work and keep Nathan McKinnon happy. This team is 10 times better when they're playing together on a line.
Yeah,
Nate,
especially with Landeskog out too, man.
Mhm.
You got to think about that. Like, you don't have him on your team, and that's a huge blow.
Rantanen's gonna get an 8-year by $14 million deal. I will put my foot on the pedal. I will die on that hill. That's gonna be his contract. I think he gets as much as Leon Draisaitl because Mikko Rantanen is Leon Draisaitl to Nathan McKinnon. How Draisaitl is to McDavid. It's gonna be the same exact deal. And call me crazy. I might already have somebody shooting me in the comments wherever this gets posted. But if Mikko Rantanen is going to end up getting more than McKinnon's current 12.6.
Oh, yeah, I
And
think
if
so.
I'm Nathan McKinnon, listen, Nathan McKinnon seems like one of the most unselfish people in all of hockey, to be honest with you. What the Avalanche can also do, though, is instead of giving him the $14 million, what the only other option I think will be is that they just give him an 8 by $12.6 million deal. You guys are both making 12.6, so neither of you guys feel like
He's not doing that. He's not
you
doing
don't
that.
think
No
Mikko
way.
would do that.
If Miko was gonna do that, man,
You
it's
would have
already
done it
done.
already. Yeah.
It's already done. Like,
Yeah,
So
I
we're
think
back to 14 million for him.
Colorado messed up by not extending him before Draisaitl got the extension, because now, like, I think everyone agrees Draisaitl earned that money, like he
Mhm.
deserves it. But if you think that Rantanen is on the same level as Draisaitl, then it's no problem. But he's a
Yes.
winger. Draisaitl's a center. It's a little different. And at the same time, like, why would he take less money? Like, it's not like Nathan McKinnon's like Crosby taking 8.7 a year, and then you're like, oh man, that's my captain. Let me follow after him. Like, Nathan McKinnon was the highest paid player when he signed, so why wouldn't Rantanen do the same thing?
And if
You know,
Rantanen gets the UFA status, some team will give him that money.
Oh,
Chicago's got
yes.
the wallet open. They're ready.
Yeah, no, that would be huge. That would be a huge get to get Bedard, a winger that good. Yeah,
Yeah.
he would be
He
number one
fucking
on their
needs a
list.
winger, dude.
Yeah.
Yeah, dude, Mitch Marner's getting it too. Like, if it's the same thing with Toronto, like they're probably like, okay, Mitch Nylander signed this much, you're gonna sign the same thing, and he's like, nah, you see what Draisaitl got? This is what we're doing now. Like,
This
that's how the market's working.
with
So
the cap going up, and Gary Bettman expects it to be close to 100 million within the next 3 to 5 years or so. Draisaitl was like, "Fuck it, give me 14," and now all these players that feel like they're just as good as Draisaitl, top players in the league, gonna ask for between 13 to 14.5 million dollars. So
Yeah, I think even if there's a little bit of pain with the cap for a couple years while you're waiting for that cap to go up with Rantanen, I think you just find a way to make it work. Because
yeah,
you
with
can't
those two,
afford to let
you have
you
to.
can't afford to let a player of that caliber just walk.
No,
no,
like,
and that means you have to trade him, which is
That's
crazy
not
But you're
happening.
not gonna. There's
Yeah, they're not winning the cup this year if they trade him.
Well, like if you don't trade him and you don't sign him, that's a catastrophe.
you're
Mhm.
fumbling
So
the bag.
I think they just got to do it like, hey, here's your contract. Will you take the 14? If he's like, nah, maybe I want more. Or like, if he's like, I'm not moving off of 14, then this is what you do. You say, okay, we're going to trade you. Because if he's not going to sign unless it's 14 and you don't want to pay, this is where you're at. Like,
This is what I was shocked by is that we heard absolutely nothing about Mikko with extension talks at all. So I don't know if they engaged in anything. I don't know if Colorado hit Rantanen up. I don't know if Rantanen hit Colorado up or I guess his agent, whatever. Which was very odd because with players of this caliber, they try to at least get something done the summer before or like before the season starts, like before their contract year. Mikko's had nothing. So Miko's riding this out. He might be, fuck it, I don't care. Maybe he's going to be aiming for something higher than 14. I don't know. Like, Mikko right
that'd be
now is going to
crazy.
put up 140 points at this pace.
Yeah,
Know.
it's deserving, right? Like if you're
It
in the top
is.
10 of point scorers, you deserve top 10 point scorer money. It doesn't matter what market you're in or if you have another star player. Like based on your production, Mikko Rantanen's a $14 million player in the NHL. So
I
I
mean, yeah, he
want
had back-to-back 100-point seasons.
yeah.
Where's this team that I'm looking for? Am I fucking blind? I will. Do you either of you guys know off the top of your head because I can't find this team for some reason? If McDavid is up after this season or the following season?
He has one more year
One
left
more.
after this
Yep.
Okay.
year.
Okay. So I was
I'm
gonna.
assuming they get that deal done this summer, though. Just get it over with.
Yeah, that's going to be 15 plus at
Yeah,
least.
whatever
So,
he wants, just blank check.
Yeah.
I honestly wonder if the Miko situation is going to be they wait until like right before July 1st, get something done then, and kind of like
I would be
Edge it.
pressed if I was a fan of Colorado, dude. I would be pressed. That
I
like
think as soon as their season's over, that's priority number one for the GM. Colorado is getting Rantanen signed. Whether you win the cup or you lose like in the second round of the
Yeah.
playoffs, you have that end of year press conference. Like our number one priority is Rantanen right now.
yeah, it
Yeah.
wouldn't even surprise me if they signed him like sooner than later. Like you could see it
Mhm.
happen at any point. It's gonna be one of those contracts where it'll just pop up like Nylander last year, where it's just like, oh hey, he signed, everything's good, you know.
I wanna before we move on to Utah, I wanna ask you guys a question. Preston, I don't know if I asked you this. Are we looking at Colorado right now as a prime cup contender in the
Yeah,
Western Conference at this
No,
point? No.
I am.
no, goaltending is not good enough. I like the move. It's cool. It's not good enough. You don't have the same defense that you did. You don't have reliability with Nishushkin 100%. You don't have Landeskog. You don't have Kadri from when you had that average goaltending. It's not the same Colorado team. So I think unless you're gonna upgrade some area, which they likely will, I think that's maybe even adding to the Rantanen thing where they're not sure if like this team is 100% and if they're willing to invest right now in that kind of team structure. So no, right now, talk to me at the trade deadline. I might change my opinion depending on what they do, but goaltending is not consistent enough to do it. So,
It's just in my opinion. I think a team where you have like Nathan McKinnon, Mikko Rantanen, Kale McCarr. I think I don't think you can count them out. I mean, I think they're going to get a pretty decent upgrade with Mackenzie Blackwood. I know he's not an amazing goalie by any means, but he's better than what they had. And they won a Stanley Cup with Darcy Kempfer, who was an average goalie his whole career.
but again,
But
they
that
had
team was gross.
lockdown
Yeah,
Landeskog.
I
Kadri
understand.
was your third line center. Like that's crazy. So it's not like I'm not saying they won't. Like you're 100% right. Like would it surprise me if Colorado won the cup this year? Absolutely not. Like not even for a second. But it would actually be more shocking to me if they made it past teams like Vegas and Dallas this year, or even Edmonton, and ended up going all the way. I think.
I mean, I think they do make a big move at the deadline, though, because especially like Landeskog, as far as I know, he's still trying to play this year,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah, I guess what would you make a move for? Like, what's the area that you're fixing? Because it seems like you're pretty confident in Blackwood and Wedgwood. So,
I'm
say
not
goaltending.
100% confident. I mean, I think they trade for a defensive defenseman and probably a top six forward. I mean, I don't know. They don't have a lot of draft capital to
I
trade.
don't know
That's
about
the
top
problem.
six. No. I mean, I guess you could. You could trade for a top six forward because you can slide one of the wings down because Middlestad and McKinnon, your obvious 1 and 2 centers.
Hmm.
And then Mikko staying in the top six. I think Lehkonen is good enough to stay in the top six. Like, would you move Ross Colton down and like you could do all like the little fiddling around with their lineup if you traded for a top six forward, depending on who it was. I would personally go after a middle pairing defenseman to go with Sam Girard. I think that's their one glaring need. I think your forward core is good enough with McKinnon, with Ranson and Lehkonen and Nichushkin, even Middlestead and Colton. Like, the top six is okay. If you can go out and get a middle pair guy to get with Sam Girard, I think you'll be in pretty decent shape. And if they just did that and didn't make any moves, if I was an Avalanche fan, I wouldn't be that mad. If the Avalanche are still on this high come towards the trade deadline and they stay pat, which I highly doubt it, I'm assuming they're going to be aggressive because that's how Colorado has been the past 5 years. I would be pretty pissed if I was a Colorado Avalanche fan.
Like, how is that Bowen Byram trade looking to you guys now that that's how you feel? Is it looking worse and worse? And do you
I
also, there's rumors, guys, about with Calgary being kind of good. If Calgary retains some of his salary, should they go and get Kadri again and try to bring that magic back to the lineup? Those are two potential moves I could see. But the Byram one, if you guys really feel that way about the defense, was that a bad move in hindsight based on like
I
middle
think
stats overall production?
I
I
think the
think
Sabres needed Middlestat more than it needed Byram. I think
Agreed.
if they didn't have Owen Power and Darlene, I think you make that trade. But do you really need three offensive
No.
defensemen like that? No. And I think Middlestat is more valuable, especially as a 2C. I mean, look at this season Dylan Cousins is having. He's been horrible this
Yeah.
year. And I get Middlestat's in a better situation in Colorado, but I think Middlestat is a better player than Cousins.
we saw it last season when we traded Middlestad. Middlestad was actually one of our best forwards, most consistent forward, and we felt like we needed a guy, a defenseman to go in the top four. Okay, you don't need a guy like Bowen Byram, to be honest with you. I get Colorado was shopping him around, and I get he's an attractive trade target, but we didn't need a guy like that. And I get they didn't think Middlestad was part of their long-term plan, so they shipped him out. But you could have done something better. And Middlestead wanted to be here for 7 to 8 years. He wanted a long-term contract. The Sabres wouldn't give it to them. So at that point, it just felt like a move just had to be done. Anybody but an offensive defenseman would have been okay.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what Colorado does, though. But I could see them going making a trade, but just kind of like currently constructed. I just feel like they're legit, but they're not like upper echelon with like the Edmontons and Dallases of that conference.
Yeah, I want to see what they do at the trade deadline before I have them as like a top tier team in the West. I still
Hmm.
think they are a cup contender, though.
Agreed. Yeah.
Sticking in the Western Conference with the Utah Hockey Club, I just want to give them their flowers real quick because Utah has won 4 straight games. They've gotten back into playoff contention. By no means do I think they're a playoff team. I think they're in the same boat as Calgary, where they're just going to hang around for a little bit, maybe like be in a playoff spot for a day or two, whatever, if they string together more wins, but kind of falter out. I don't think they're a playoff team. I think they can compete. I think they're good enough to compete with some of the upper echelon of teams. But I mean, props to them for being 7-1-2 in their last 10. They look good so far, but you know,
Yeah, no, it's a good team, man. Young, fun team to watch. Like, I think it's great that we're gonna get to see them kind of like build this organization with like a fresh perspective. They look way more into the game than they did in Arizona, which I think is just a huge bump for that team. And with some of the young guys they have on that roster, it wouldn't surprise me if they're just getting better each year and come back in like 2 years and are in contention. So
Yeah, no, I agree. I think Utah's in a good spot. If they make the playoffs this year, I mean, great. I don't know if that happens.
doesn't
I
hurt them
mean,
though.
no, it
do
doesn't
they
hurt at
have
all.
like that like one guy though that you can really say is like a game changer? Because as much as I like Keller, I don't think he's like you're the best guy on a Stanley Cup winning team. You know what I
No,
mean?
I don't think so either.
No, not okay. Not Keller now. If they don't have one now, but one guy that I think could turn into that is Logan Cooley. Dude's having a phenomenal season, straight up and down.
Yeah.
He's right now he's playing as their second line center. He's gonna be their franchise #1 center. Him and Clayton Keller together, man,
Dylan
disgusting.
Genther looks really
Dylan
good
He does
Genther
look
is
too.
good.
great. When Clayton Keller told Friedman before the season started at like the Vegas player stuff, whatever, Keller said that Genther could score 50 goals in his sleep. When Genther got off to the hot start, I was like, it could happen. Now he's at 16 goals in 30 something games, 32, 33 games. But still though, like he's gonna put up a 30-goal season unless something catastrophic happens. Knock on wood, it doesn't happen. Like Genther's a great player. Like they're set up great with Keller, Cooley, and Genther to build around. And I think personally, Barrett Hayton, he's okay. He's not having a phenomenal season, but I mean, you don't really have to expect him to have a phenomenal season when you have the 3 guys that I just named.
I think
Yeah.
Sergachev was a really, really underrated pickup for them too. He's been
Mhm.
awesome for them.
100%.
You
Yeah,
know,
that
they
he
have a
deserves it.
#1 defenseman.
Yeah, like after batting back from that injury, getting traded after trying to come back in the playoffs, like the way he's impacted their culture has just been insane.
The goaltending part of Utah, I think, is a complete weak point. I thought Connor Ingram was going to be better than what he has been this season. Preston can attest to that. Preston was not having any of that fucking shit.
I'm with
And
you, Preston. I'm not on Ingram.
Yeah,
Yeah,
neither
dude,
am I.
the recency bias with goaltenders in the NHL, it triggers me so much. Like a guy has a good season, and we're all of a sudden gonna be like, he's the guy, he's him. Like he's gonna lead them to something. Like they're good. Okay, don't get me wrong, they deserve flowers, but they're a rebuilding team. We all can
Mhm.
agree with that. They're still in a rebuild. Like I think Ottawa did it too. People like Corpusalo is going to go to Ottawa. He's the guy. What happened? Like it happens so often, and it's like I think Vamelka is way better than Connor Ingram, and I
Yeah,
think that he should be getting the starts because he has more upside. I feel like, but yeah, I'm not trying to rant, but I'm out on Connor Ingram, man. He's a good goalie, but he's not like no.
no,
I,
he's like a solid backup at best.
Yeah, he's a high level backup. He's
Yeah.
good.
dude, I so thought Connor Ingram was going to take the spot from Vamelka. By now, when we were going over our roster predictions for Team Canada, I was like, Connor Ingram's going to be on this team. Like, he's
Yeah, you're
going
crazy.
to.
Crazy.
Not even a choice for Team Canada. So
Yeah, man. I would be keeping more of an eye on teams like Ottawa and Detroit this year than Utah to make a really big step forward. I know
Mhm.
Detroit's kind of struggling, but still that team, I think they're more the interesting teams to keep an eye on with like, will they fire sale? Are they going to trade a guy like Kane? Tarasenko. Like, I think that's going to be a fun situation to watch. And I just really think Ottawa deserves a lot of credit this year for how they started, the criticism that we all gave them, and just this turnaround, especially Linus Allmark, I think has just been insane. So some flowers to them too, because they deserve it.
Yeah, Linus Allmark completely changed that team.
Yeah.
Like I said earlier, when you have a goalie, like your team knows they have a good goalie, it changes everything.
Yeah, I wish I had chatted with you guys before the whole Swayman contract was signed, because if you were around me and people I talked to, I was screaming for them to keep Linus Allmark. I'm the biggest Linus Allmark fan. I loved him in Buffalo. I thought it was the best pickup the Bruins have ever made when they had Tuukka Rask. I just think that these national goalies who have played in much like heavier competition where goaltending is more important, I think that they are a lot more reliable than some of the American goalies out there. Unless you're like Connor Hellebuck. And I'm not even like dogging on Swayman. I just don't think you needed to pay Swayman 8.25 where Allmark was on a bargain deal and could have just been fantastic for you this year. So yeah,
The
good
spot
things for
that
Allmark.
the spot that the Bruins are in, they could have traded Swayman instead of Allmark, and they would be top 3 in the Atlantic
I mean,
right now.
I get why they decided to pick Swayman. He's younger. I didn't know. I don't think anyone thought he was going to take this big of a step back this year. I think there's a few reasons why that might be happening. I still think he could bounce back, but I get why Boston decided to keep Swayman over Allmark. I don't think there was going to be a world where they could possibly keep both of them.
Yeah, it's not even about like anything like that. It's just like I believed in Linus Allmark from the start,
Mhm.
and I was like, whoever ends up getting this guy is going to be so happy with the turnaround in their goaltending. And Ottawa, I think that was a great move for them to make. They lost practically nothing, and they're reaping the fruits of that. So
I
that's
want to
awesome.
pull up a really quick. I always find this great about Allmark because he was on the Sabres, and people, I not to, I don't really think this means a lot, but a lot of people didn't really know a lot about him when the Bruins signed him because he was in the Sabres and they sucked.
Yeah.
I think the one thing that speaks values about Linus Ullmark to me is his last year in Buffalo, that horrible 2021 COVID season where they were like the worst team in the league. It wasn't even close. He had a winning record and a above 900 save percentage, which is insane for how bad that team was.
Do you mind giving out his stats real quick?
For that year in Buffalo.
Yeah, for that
He
year.
played 20 games. He was 9-6-0, 2.63 goals against average, 917 save percentage.
Dude,
Wasn't he was hurt for half that season
Yeah,
too,
no, he
right?
missed half the season. Yeah.
The fact that might be a bigger fumble than the Jack Eichel situation from the Sabres. And the Bruins pounced on that shit. They took him from a division rival.
They knew.
They
were
saw
like,
that shit, and they're like, they knew he was gonna be. I bet you in that room they saw those stats when he hit the open market, right? He left them free agency.
Oh, they saw his stats on a bad team, and
they're
like,
like,
look,
this
we're
dude's gonna
good.
be a Vezina winning
9-17
trophy.
on Buffalo. Oof.
Yeah.
I bet
Especially
you in
with
that
that
room.
Buffalo team that like won like fucking 7 games that year.
That team should have been so much better though.
Yeah,
Like
I know. It drives me crazy.
2019 Buffalo Sabres, dude. Oh my gosh, that team was loaded. They had like Sam Reinhart, Ryan O'Reilly, Jack Eichel, Linus Allmark. Dude,
It
they
just
were
doesn't work.
loaded.
I don't know why players just don't work here.
It's got to be
I mean-
again like Rangers a coaching or a culture issue there. There's
a culture
something in
thing.
there.
Yeah.
It's something.
It's going to end it for today's episode. If you guys enjoy all of our content, all of our socials are down below, as well as the subscribe button. Go follow Jimmy on Instagram. He posts some great YouTube videos. Go check them out. Subscribe as well. Check out his content. We'll see you guys in our next episode.